If you love true-to-life stories filled with love, betrayal, and redemption, then stay with me on this journey. Don't forget to like this page, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Curiosity Made Me Ask for more gripping stories like this one. Now, let me take you into my world. My name is Michael Anderson, and this is my story. I was born into wealth, not the type that whispers, but the type that roars and makes the world take notice. My father, Richard Anderson, was a giant in the farming industry. He owned thousands of acres spread across the heart of Nebraska, where the land stretched wide and golden under the American sun. From corn to soybeans, from wheat to livestock, his empire fed millions. But that wasn't all. He had stakes in logistics, real estate, food processing, and even international trading. To the world, my father was a titan. To me, he was simply Dad. From my earliest days, I was groomed to follow in his footsteps. I studied in the best schools. Private academies with polished hallways and professors flown in from Europe for special lectures. My classmates drove luxury cars while we were still in college, but my father never spoiled me with such things. He taught me to earn, not expect. Despite the wealth that padded every corner of my life, I carried myself with humility. I never saw myself as better than anyone. My classmates used to laugh at me for choosing to sit with janitors, mechanics, and even the cafeteria workers. I always believed that a man's worth wasn't in the money he carried, but in the heart that beat inside him. By 25, I had graduated with top honors in business administration from Stanford University. My professors praised my sense of logic and fairness. My father, though not a man who often showed emotion, looked at me with tears in his eyes when I walked across the graduation stage. "You'll do greater things than me," he whispered that night. "And I'll be proud to call you my son." For 2 years, I worked under him, learning every corner of his empire. He taught me not just the math of profits, but the heart of leadership. How to treat workers with dignity. How to risk wisely. How to see opportunities where others saw deserts. But when I turned 27, another question arose. "Michael, it's time you got married," my father said one evening as we walked across the wide field of our family ranch. "Every empire needs a queen by its king's side." I knew he was right. But love in my world was complicated. Women smiled at me, but I often saw the reflection of my father's money in their eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the gold mine I represented. I wanted something different. Something real. So I did the unthinkable. I left the city. I went away from the glass buildings, luxury clubs, and corporate meetings, and moved to a quiet town in Colorado, far from anyone who knew my name. I changed my car for an old pickup truck, dressed in simple jeans and shirts, and rented a small house. I wanted to meet someone who would love me for me, not the heir to the Anderson fortune. And that's when I met Rachel Miller. She was 25, 2 years younger than me. A school teacher with soft brown hair that framed her face like a gentle curtain. Her laughter had no calculation, no schemes, it was pure, like bells ringing on a Sunday morning. The first time I saw her was at a farmer's market. She was helping an old lady carry bags of groceries to her car. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't do it for praise. She just did it. We started talking after that. I told her I was a small-time businessman working in agriculture. Not a lie, just not the full truth. She liked that I worked with my hands, that I smelled of earth instead of expensive colognes. Rachel didn't care about money. She cared about books, children, and family dinners. She cared about sunsets, quiet prayers, and planting flowers outside her small apartment. For the first time, I felt seen, not as Richard Anderson's son, but as Michael, the man. Our love was quiet, deep, and simple. Within a year, I asked her to marry me. She said yes with tears in her eyes and no thought of what my bank account held. We had a small wedding, just close friends and a few relatives from her side. I didn't reveal my true background then. I wanted her love to remain untainted. I told myself I would tell her in time. And time came when Rachel became pregnant with our first child. I couldn't hide the truth anymore. One night, as she rested her head on my chest, I told her everything. About my father. About our wealth. About the empire I was set to inherit. She sat up, wide-eyed, silent for a long time. Then, slowly, she smiled. "I didn't marry you for money, Michael," she whispered, placing her hand on my cheek. "I married you because you're the kindest man I've ever met. Nothing changes that." And for a while, life was perfect. But then her mother came. And everything changed. Rachel gave birth to our first child on a calm spring morning. The hospital room was filled with the smell of antiseptic and soft cries. When the doctor placed that small, wrinkled, red-faced boy in my arms, I felt the earth shift under my feet. His tiny fingers curled around mine like he had been waiting his whole life just to hold me. We named him Ethan. For me, Ethan wasn't just a child. He was a promise. A new chance to build something bigger than businesses and wealth, a family. Rachel was glowing with motherhood, though tired and fragile. And in that fragile moment, her mother came into our home. Her name was Margaret Miller. Margaret was a sharp-eyed woman with lips that rarely curved into a smile. She wore her pride like armor and her discontent like perfume. When she walked into our house, I felt the temperature drop. At first, I welcomed her. She was family now, after all. I thought she came to support her daughter as she recovered from childbirth. But it wasn't long before I realized she came with something else, an agenda. Margaret watched me closely, always studying, always questioning. "Michael," she said one evening, her eyes narrowing as she looked around our home. "This house, it doesn't look like the life of an ordinary businessman. Where do you really come from?" I forced a smile. "I told you, ma'am. My father owns farmland in Nebraska. I've been helping him with the family business." She raised her brows. "And how much business is that?" I didn't answer. But she had already guessed. Margaret was not the type of woman to overlook details. She noticed the expensive furniture, the polished floors, the fact that Rachel wore jewelry she hadn't owned before. Slowly, she pieced it together. And when she realized the truth, that I was the son of Richard Anderson, heir to a fortune, her eyes didn't soften. They hardened. I caught her one night whispering to Rachel when she thought I had gone to bed. "Don't you see?" Margaret said, her voice low but sharp. "This man is your golden ticket. His father's wealth will one day belong to him, and to you. But you must be careful. Men like him, they never give everything to their wives. You have to be wise. You have to think of your future." Rachel whispered back, "Mom, I love him. That's all that matters." But Margaret wasn't satisfied. Love, to her, was weakness. Wealth was the only true anchor. From then on, I noticed Rachel changing. It wasn't sudden, but little by little. She began to ask questions about the business, about properties, about accounts. At first, I thought she was simply curious, wanting to learn my world. But sometimes her questions were too sharp, too directed. Then came the distance. Rachel became distracted. Absent-minded. She would leave the house more often, claiming to visit friends or shop for Ethan. I trusted her. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband who controlled her steps. But I was naive. Margaret's shadow was falling deeper into our home. One evening, as I was reading to Ethan in his nursery, I overheard Margaret again, her voice firm, almost commanding. "Rachel, you cannot waste your youth waiting. Secure your place now. If anything happens to him, you and Ethan will have it all. Do you understand?" I froze at the doorway, my chest tightening. And then I heard something that nearly shattered me. Rachel's voice, soft, hesitant. "Mom, there's someone else. Someone else. The words cut through me like a blade. I pressed my back against the wall, my throat dry. Rachel was having an affair. My wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had stripped myself of every secret for, had let another man into her heart. Margaret's reply came cold and calculated. That's good. Use him if you must. A woman needs options. But don't forget, the real prize is in this house. This man's empire will one day be yours if you play your cards right. I wanted to burst into that room, to demand answers, to shake Rachel by the shoulders and ask her why. But Ethan stirred in my arms, his little head resting against my chest, and I couldn't. I couldn't let his first memories of me be rage. So I stood there, broken in silence. From that day, a distance grew between me and Rachel. She was still gentle, still smiled, still laughed at times, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the way she avoided my gaze when I asked simple questions. Margaret, meanwhile, moved like a queen in my home, giving orders, rearranging, whispering poison into the corners of our walls. And then, one night, it happened. I came home late from the office, exhausted. Rachel welcomed me with dinner, my favorite, roast chicken with herbs. She poured me a glass of wine, kissed my cheek, and told me how much she missed me. It felt almost too perfect. I ate. Within an hour, my stomach twisted violently. My skin turned cold, sweat dripping from my forehead. Rachel's face blurred in front of me. The last thing I heard before I collapsed was Margaret's voice, sharp with urgency. Don't call anyone yet. Let it finish its work. Poison. My wife. My home. The betrayal was complete. But fate wasn't done with me yet. When I woke up, the world around me was blurred and hazy. The sharp white light of the hospital ceiling stung my eyes. Tubes were attached to my arm, a machine beeped steadily beside me, and my chest ached as if my heart had fought a war of its own. The doctor leaned over me. You're a lucky man, Michael. Another 10 minutes, and we might have lost you. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my lips cracked. My body was heavy, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. I remembered everything. The wine. The food. The twisting in my stomach. And Margaret's voice, cold, merciless. Rachel was sitting by my bedside, her face pale, her eyes red as though she had been crying for hours. When our eyes met, she gasped, pressing my hand to her lips. Michael, she whispered. Thank God. Thank God you're alive. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her tears were real. But in the shadows of my memory, her silence that night echoed louder than any words. The police came not long after. The doctors had run tests. The poison in my body was no accident. They needed answers. Rachel sat frozen when they questioned her. Her mother, Margaret, sat beside her, firm and defiant. This is ridiculous, Margaret said coldly. You think my daughter would harm her own husband? A man she loves. The officer replied calmly, Ma'am, the traces of poison were found in the food prepared that evening. Until we conclude our investigations, neither of you can leave the premises. Rachel's tears returned, but this time, I looked closer. Were they born of guilt, or fear of being caught? As the investigation unfolded, secrets bled out like ink on water. The affair I had overheard was true. Rachel had been meeting another man, a colleague from her teaching job. What began as friendly company grew into something deeper under her mother's influence. Margaret convinced her that she deserved more than just being a wife and mother, that she should keep a safety net in case my wealth slipped through her fingers. And so, step by step, Rachel listened. Until the day Margaret placed the poison in her hand. She didn't mean it, Margaret said in the interrogation room. I told her it was the only way. I told her it was for Ethan, for her future. I take the blame. Rachel sat beside her, trembling. But the law doesn't measure only words. It measures actions. They were both convicted. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Betrayal written in legal ink. Margaret received the heavier sentence. Rachel, though guilty, was shown mercy because she was a first-time offender, a mother, and young. When the gavel fell, my heart broke. I should have been furious. I should have wished them both gone from my life forever. But I sat in that courtroom, staring at the woman I once believed was my soulmate, and all I felt was sorrow. Sorrow for the love we lost. Sorrow for the poison that was not only in my veins but in her heart. For 2 years, Rachel stayed in prison. Margaret never made it out. Her heart gave way before her sentence ended. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was simply the weight of her choices. When Rachel was finally released, she stood before me in tears. She looked thinner, older, her once bright eyes now dimmed by shame. "Michael," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know. I loved you once. And I lost myself. Please, for Ethan's sake, let me try again." I stood there, staring at her, my mind torn between the memory of the poison and the memory of the love we once shared. Forgiveness is not a door you open easily. But for Ethan, for the boy who carried both our blood, I unlocked it. I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because bitterness would destroy me if I didn't. We began again, slowly, painfully. She lived under the shadow of her mistake, but in time, she rebuilt herself as a wife and a mother. She poured her energy into raising Ethan, into teaching him values she had once abandoned. And Ethan grew into a bright young man. Wiser than his years, sharper than even I had been. By the time he was 25, he had already begun to lead our businesses into heights my father never imagined. In him, I saw redemption. In him, I saw proof that even broken roots can produce strong branches. Rachel and I grew old together. Not without scars, not without regrets, but with a quiet peace. She never forgot what she had done. Neither did I. But we chose to live beyond it, for the sake of our family. And when people asked me what I learned from my story, I would answer. Trust is fragile. Love is powerful. And forgiveness, though the hardest gift, is the only thing that can turn ashes into life again. Forgiveness is like carrying a heavy stone in your chest. Even when you set it down, you can still feel the imprint of its weight pressing on your heart. That's how it was with Rachel. When she came back into my life after prison, it wasn't as though the slate was wiped clean. The memory of the betrayal lingered. There were nights I would wake up in a cold sweat, reliving the moment when the poison burned through my veins, when her silence felt louder than thunder. But every time I looked at Ethan, our son, I knew I had to choose a different path. I had to forgive, not just for Rachel, but for myself, for my peace, and for my boy's future. Rachel returned to our home, though she was not the same woman who had once walked into my life with shy smiles and simple clothes. Prison had changed her. It had stripped away her pride, her careless desires, and her dependence on her mother's manipulative voice. She carried shame like a scar, but she also carried a hunger to make things right. At first, I kept my distance. My conversations with her were short, guarded. My heart needed time. But Rachel was patient. She cooked, she cleaned, she laughed with Ethan, and she prayed with me at night. Slowly, I saw a woman fighting her demons, clawing her way back to the light she had once abandoned. One evening, after we put Ethan to bed, she sat beside me on the porch. The night air was cool, and the stars stretched across the sky like spilled diamonds. "Michael," she said softly, her hands trembling. "I don't know why you chose to forgive me. I don't know why you even let me back here. But I promise you this, I will never fail you again. I will never let my mother's shadow control me. I just want to be your wife and Ethan's mother, nothing more." Her voice broke, and I saw the sincerity in her eyes. For the first time in years, I believed her. That was the night I let go of the last shard of bitterness in my heart. I took her hand in mine, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Then let's walk forward together." From then on, Rachel devoted herself completely to our family. She stood by me in the business when I traveled, took care of the home, and became a guiding light for Ethan. She no longer sought validation from the world or material things. She found her purpose in us. And Ethan, oh, Ethan was the jewel of our lives. He grew into a remarkable young man, not spoiled by wealth, not corrupted by power. He watched our struggles and our healing, and from it, he learned resilience, humility, and wisdom. When he was 21, I began introducing him to the family businesses. Just like me, he absorbed knowledge quickly, understood people deeply, and made decisions with remarkable clarity. By 25, he was already surpassing me in vision. He had the spirit of my father, the endurance of myself, and the compassion of his mother. I often told him, "Son, wealth is not measured in dollars alone. It is measured in how many lives you touch, how many people breathe easier because you lived." He carried those words like scripture. Rachel would watch him with quiet pride. Sometimes I caught her crying softly, overwhelmed by the man he was becoming. She once told me, "Ethan is my redemption. Through him, God gave me a second chance." I couldn't argue with that. Life, however, has its way of reminding us that scars never fully vanish. There were people, old family friends, business rivals, who whispered behind my back. They said I was a fool to forgive Rachel. They said a woman capable of betrayal could never change. But I had lived with her. I had seen the way she tucked Ethan in every night, the way she held my hand when I was weary, the way she refused to let her past dictate her tomorrow. And in those quiet moments, I knew I had made the right choice. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. But it gave us the strength to build a future. By the time I stepped down as CEO and placed Ethan at the helm of our global conglomerate, Rachel and I had lived nearly 3 decades since that night of poison and betrayal. And though the memory still lingered like a shadow, it no longer hurt. It was just a reminder, a scar we carried together. And together, we had built something stronger than betrayal, stronger than wealth, stronger even than fear. We had built a family. There comes a time in every man's life when he steps back, looks at the road he has walked, and asks himself, "What will I leave behind?" For me, that time came in my old age, with silver streaking my hair and the weight of wisdom on my shoulders. I had walked through valleys of betrayal, climbed mountains of success, and waded through rivers of forgiveness. And through it all, God had blessed me with one constant: family. Ethan was no longer just my son. He was a man, a leader, a visionary. By 30, he had taken the business my father built, the empire I sustained, and expanded it into a global force that touched lives across continents. But beyond the numbers, beyond the profit and prestige, what made me most proud was his heart. He carried compassion into every boardroom, humility into every meeting, and wisdom into every decision. He treated our employees not as tools but as family. Farmers, drivers, secretaries, executives, he made each one feel valued, just as my father once taught me. Rachel, though older now and weathered by time, found joy in watching him soar. She poured her love into her role as a grandmother when Ethan had children of his own. I often caught her smiling, her eyes soft with gratitude, whispering, "This is more than I ever deserved." And she was right. The truth was, her path had not been easy. She carried regret like a hidden bruise, always there, never fully gone. But she turned it into fuel. Fuel to be a better wife, a better mother, a better soul. And though the world had once condemned her, I saw her redemption written in the way our grandchildren clung to her, the way Ethan honored her, the way she stood tall despite her past. One afternoon, as the sun melted into the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, Ethan sat with me on the porch of the old family house. He leaned back, stretched his legs, and said, "Dad, People always talk about wealth as if it's the greatest inheritance. But that's not what you gave me. You gave me values. You gave me resilience. You gave me love, even when it was tested. That's the real legacy. I turned to look at him, pride swelling in my chest, and replied, "Son, the world will always chase riches, but the richest man is the one who knows peace in his home, forgiveness in his heart, and purpose in his life. You've learned that. And that makes you wealthier than I ever was." He smiled, and I saw not just my son, but my father in him. The circle of life had turned, and I was content. As the years passed, Rachel and I grew old together, our love deepened by trials. Our story was not one of perfection. No, it was one of scars, healed wounds, and the grace of second chances. We had stumbled, fallen, and risen again, hand in hand. And when I finally left this world, I knew I was leaving behind more than businesses, lands, or wealth. I was leaving behind a legacy of endurance, forgiveness, and love that had triumphed over greed and betrayal. Rachel lived longer than me. She carried my memory with her until her last breath, surrounded by our children and grandchildren. And when she passed, it was not as the woman who once plotted with her mother, but as a redeemed wife, a beloved mother, and a cherished grandmother. Ethan carried on, surpassing even my father's dreams. But what made me proudest was not the billions he amassed, nor the reach of the family name, it was the fact that he raised his children with humility, kindness, and strength. That was the true victory. And so, my story is not just about betrayal or forgiveness, wealth or power. It is about the lessons life teaches when you least expect them. I learned that love is fragile, yet strong enough to survive the deepest wounds. I learned that forgiveness does not erase pain, but it heals it. I learned that true wealth is not measured in possessions, but in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave. And above all, I learned that a man's greatest success is not in the empire he builds, but in the family he nurtures. That was my life. That was my legacy. White heavy checkmark if this story moved you, taught you, or held you in suspense. Don't forget to like and comment below. Share your thoughts, and let me know if you'd love more stories like this. Your support means the world and keeps the stories flowing. Thanks for watching.